The African Continental Free Trade Area is piloting a Pan-African payments and settlement system using local currencies to overcome the continent's foreign exchange challenges. But AfCTA Secretary General Wamkele Mene says for a single market for goods and services to succeed, trust from the private sector will be crucial. Newzroom Afrika business editor Xolani Mbanjwa caught up with Mene on the sidelines of the 54th World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland.
We are reducing the cost of doing business for you, the cost of exporting. A single set of rules for export of your product all over the continent on 93% of products. We have a long way to go, but we've made significant progress in terms of industrial policy for the continent. I mentioned rules of origin, positioning the continent for industrial development. In payments, we've introduced the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System, which will enable payment in local currency, so that if you want to trade, you are in South Africa, you want to trade with somebody in Egypt, you don't have to buy the dollar to trade with somebody in Egypt. You trade in rand, the person receives the Egyptian pound. So we've made significant progress.
How important is it to be here? And should that be the message from Africa to say, it is our time, the world owes us, because we have not had a fair trade deal anywhere in history?
I think that we must first, as Africans, believe that we ourselves can drive industrialization, investment in our continent. I mean, if we take South Africa itself, over 1 trillion rands worth of capital that is available to be deployed. And when you move outside of South Africa, that capitalization potential is even higher. Africa has over 400 companies that have a turnover of $1 billion or more. So we've got to create an environment where our own capital is deployed on the continent. Yes, we come here, we talk to Coca-Cola, we talk to Pfizer, we talk to all of them about the opportunities on the continent and the enabling environment that we are establishing through the AfCFTA. So I think on the one hand, yes, it's important that we engage them and we tell them that we have a very strong proposition to make about investing in Africa, but at the same time, we've got to convince our own African investors to invest in Africa.
Before we conclude, from what you've just said, would you say this year's theme, rebuilding trust, is what African leaders should have been doing amongst themselves for decades, rebuilding that trust amongst themselves, because it seems there's a lack of trust amongst the African leaders and the captains of industry, in that they can do what is actually possible. Before we conclude briefly.
Well, in the AfCFTA, we have been advocating very strongly that to rebuild the trust and to enable resilience, we need the private sector. The trust and the resilience that is required means that we must focus on the private sector. It's not governments that trade. It's not South Africa and Ethiopia, the governments. It's the private sector in those countries. So we've got to create that enabling environment, and the trust will come from the environment that we establish for the goods to move, the services to move across borders. I believe our heads of states are fully conscious of that. If you were in the session yesterday, where our heads of states were present, you would have heard that very, very clearly, the ambition to make sure that even with the challenges that our continent is facing, coup d'etat here, civil war in Sudan, insecurity in the Sahel, these challenges will always be there. But we can't allow the challenges to define our ambition and the strategic direction that we are taking as a continent. If we allow these challenges to define our ambition, we will forever be at the periphery of the global economy.
Wamkele Mene, thank you very much for your time. That's the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area. a big task ahead for him, and he says that while he has mixed feelings about the World Economic Forum and how it views the African continent, this is an important gathering indeed. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Xolani Mbanjwa in Davos, Switzerland.